And so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy in the most pleasant way. In our time together tonight, there is nothing to examine, nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story. A story that begins in a world of powdered wigs and whispering silks, a world that glitters so brightly it could blind you. A story about a diamond necklace and the queen it would come to ruin. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you wish, you can even leave a small note in the comments telling me what city you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's a quiet comfort, knowing we are all sharing this stillness together across time and space. And now, with the lights turned down low, and your body feeling heavy and warm, let's simply close our eyes and arrive at the beginning of our journey. Your story tonight doesn't begin with a bang or a crash. It begins with a whisper and the soft crunch of gravel under carriage wheels. You are standing in the gardens of the Palace of Versailles, and the air itself feels different here. It's thick with the scent of 1,000 roses, of beeswax from the polished floors, and the faintest, almost imperceptible hint of perfume and powder drifting from the open windows. Before you, the palace isn't so much a building as it is a golden beast, sprawling under the French sun, its windows glittering like 1,000 unblinking eyes. You step inside and the quiet of the garden is replaced by a different kind of hush. A hush filled with the rustle of silk gowns, the soft click of buckled shoes on marble, and the low murmur of courtiers who have turned gossip into a fine art. Everything is gold. The walls, the chair legs, the picture frames, the ceiling frescoes, it's a beautiful, overwhelming, and slightly suffocating ocean of gold. You are inside the gilded cage. And every cage, of course, must have its bird. Let's find her. We'll have to push through crowds of dukes and barons who are loitering in hallways for no other reason than to be seen. We follow the whispers to the Queen's private apartments. Except, the word private here is a bit of a joke. You find yourself in her bedchamber, along with about 50 other people. And you are all here for the morning ritual known as the lever. There she is, Marie Antoinette. At this point in our story, she is still young, not yet 30. She sits in a silken row by her vanity, as a legion of ladies in waiting, each with a specific and unchangeable rank, buzzes around her. One is allowed to hand her the chemise, but only a higher ranking one can help her put it on. It's less of a private moment and more of a state-sponsored theatrical performance titled, "The Queen Manages to Get Dressed." She doesn't look at the crowd. Her eyes have a distant, glazed-over quality. This is just another Tuesday. You notice her hair, or rather, the towering confection built upon her head. This is the era of the pouf, and it is a masterpiece of absurdity. Your hair isn't just hair, it's a canvas, a 2-foot-tall declaration of your mood. A scaffold of wire and pads and false hair, all powder ghostly white. It is then decorated with feathers, ribbons, pearls, and on one particularly ambitious occasion, a fully rigged model ship celebrating a recent naval victory. It must be incredibly heavy, and you wonder how she keeps her head from lolling to one side. This is her life. A performance from the moment she opens her eyes to the moment she closes them. Always surrounded, always watched. Every gesture, every word, every new hairstyle is scrutinized, interpreted, and reported across Paris. She is the nation's most fascinating, most expensive doll. And here is a question that historians still whisper about in quiet libraries: is the woman at the center of this spectacle truly this frivolous, this obsessed with fashion and parties? Or is she just an exhausted teenager from Austria, trapped in a deeply strange system, playing the only role she's ever been taught, in a language she's still not entirely comfortable with? The truth, as it often is probably somewhere in the murky middle. As you watch her go through the motions, a duchess finally presenting the correct silk stocking for the royal foot, you can almost feel her boredom. It radiates from her like heat. She is the queen of the most powerful nation in Europe, living in the most opulent palace on earth, and yet she has no real power, no real purpose beyond producing an heir. She is bored profoundly, soul-crushingly bored. And a bored queen, you'll find, can be a dangerous thing, especially when, across the glittering city of Paris, a jeweler is putting the finishing touches on a temptation made of light and fire. Let's leave the gilded cage for a moment and let the scent of 1,000 roses fade from your mind. We're going to drift across the city of Paris, over the slate-grey rooftops and the winding ribbon of the Seine, to a quieter, more focused part of the city. You find yourself in a workshop. It's not grand or golden like the palace. The air here smells of hot metal, of polishing rouge, and of the intense concentration of master craftsmen. This is the domain of Charles Auguste Beaumont Paul Bassett, jewelers to the crown, and they are staring at their masterpiece, their magnum opus, and what is quickly becoming their colossal, glittering mistake. In the center of a velvet-lined table, under the focused beam of a single oil lamp, lies the necklace. And to call it a necklace is a bit like calling Versailles a house. It's an understatement of epic proportions. It is a cascading, shimmering, blinding river of light. It's not a single strand, but a multi-layered construction of diamond festoons, pendants, and tassels that would cover a woman's entire décolleté in a bib of pure, frozen fire. It is composed of 647 flawless diamonds, weighing a total of 2,800 carats. It is, to put it mildly, a bit much. You see, this piece wasn't their idea, not originally. It was commissioned by the old king, Louis XVI, for his favorite mistress, the glamorous Madame du Barry. He had told the jewelers to create the most magnificent necklace in all of human history, and to spare no expense. And they took him at his word. They bankrupted themselves, called in favors from diamond merchants from Antwerp to Amsterdam, and worked for years to assemble this impossible collection of stones. The only problem: the old king had the poor taste to die before the necklace was finished and paid for. Madame du Barry was promptly banished from court, leaving Beaumont Bassett with the world's most expensive piece of jewelry and a ledger book that was bleeding red ink. So they did the only logical thing. They offered it to the new queen, Marie Antoinette. And you can just imagine the scene. These two nervous men, sweating slightly in their fine coats, unveiling their treasure. They expect her to gasp, to clap her hands in delight. And she does it first. She is a great lover of beautiful things after all. But then she sees the price tag. 2 million livres. It's a number so large it's almost comical. To give you some perspective, historians still argue about the exact modern equivalent, but it's safe to say this one piece of jewelry was worth more than the entire annual budget of the French Navy. It was a nation-state ransom designed to be worn at a party. Marie Antoinette, for all her reputation for frivolity, refused. She famously, and perhaps apocryphal lie, is said to have declared, "We have more need of ships than of diamonds." Whether she actually said these exact words is a matter of some debate among scholars, but her sentiment was clear. She turned it down again when they offered it to her a second time a few years later. The jewelers were horrified. They had tried to sell it to other royals across Europe, but no one could or would afford it. It was too grand, too ostentatious, even for the kings and queens of the 18th century. And so the necklace sits there, in its velvet box in their workshop, a ticking time bomb of glitter and debt. It is a monument to a bygone era of excess, a relic of a king who is already a fading memory. The jewelers look at it with a mixture of pride and sheer terror. Their careers, their fortunes, their entire lives are tied up in this web of diamonds. They are desperate. They need a miracle. They need someone, anyone, to take this beautiful, terrible thing off their hands. And as you watch the lamplight dance across its 1,000 facets, you can almost feel it humming with a dangerous energy. It is a trap, exquisitely made, just waiting for the right players to fall into it. And elsewhere in the city, in the shadowed corners of high society, a cast of characters is beginning to assemble, drawn, as if by gravity, to the desperate gleam of this unsellable jewel. One of them, in particular, is a man of the church, a man with a wounded ego and a burning ambition. The glittering, dangerous object on the jeweler's table can wait. For now, let's leave it resting in its velvet prison and follow an invisible thread of ambition across Paris. We arrive at another palace, one that rivals Versailles in its opulence, if not its scale. This is the Palais Royal, the Parisian home of the man we've come to meet. You drift through a series of antechamber rests, each more lavish than the last, until you find him. He is standing by a tall window, looking down at his own manicured gardens, but not really seeing them. His name is Louis René Edouard de Rohan, and he is a cardinal of the Catholic Church. But don't let the title fool you into picturing a humble, ascetic man of God. Rohan is a prince of the church, which in 18th century France meant he was, first and foremost, a prince. He is handsome, charming, fabulously wealthy, and a member of one of the most ancient and powerful noble families in the country. He is the Prince Bishop of Strasbourg, a title that came with vast lands and revenues. He is the Grand Almoner of France, a prestigious court position. By every conceivable measure, he is a man who has everything. And yet, he is consumed by a single, gnawing unhappiness, the source of his great sorrow. He is utterly, hopelessly, and publicly out of favor with the Queen. You see, a few years earlier, Rohan had been France's ambassador to Vienna, the very city Marie Antoinette had grown up in. And to say he made a bad impression would be a gentle way of putting it. He lived a life of scandalous extravagance, hosted decadent parties, and treated his diplomatic duties as a minor inconvenience. Worst of all, he wrote letters back home filled with cattish, unflattering gossip about the Queen's own mother, the formidable Empress Marisa. These letters, of course, got back to the Empress, and then to her daughter. Marie Antoinette was fiercely protective of her mother's honor. From that moment on, in her eyes, Cardinal de Rohan was a vulgar, disrespectful fool. When he was recalled to Paris, he found himself met with a wall of royal ice. The Queen would not speak to him, would not look at him, and would pointedly turn her back if he entered a room. For a man like Rohan, this was more than a social snub. It was a professional catastrophe. His life's great ambition was to become the Prime Minister of France, the most powerful man in the kingdom. But he knew, as everyone knew, that the path to true influence led through the Queen. Her favor was the key that could unlock the king's trust. Without it, his ambitions were dead in the water, so he tried everything. He sent letters of apology. He begged influential friends to intercede on his behalf. He made grand, public gestures of loyalty. Nothing worked. The Queen's disapproval was absolute and unyielding. This rejection became an obsession. And this is where historians still argue over their wine glasses. Was Rohan's desperation purely about political ambition, a cold calculation for power? Or had it curdled into something more personal, a kind of desperate, almost romantic fixation on the one woman in France, in all of Europe, who could so completely and publicly disdain him? Eamon, accustomed to getting everything he wanted, was now denied the one thing he craved most, a single warm glance from his Queen. He was also, it must be said, not the most astute man at court. During his time as a diplomat, he had become a bit of a running joke for his gaffes, once famously writing a long, detailed report about the political situation in Saxony, when he had clearly meant to be writing about Poland. He had the fatal combination of immense pride and poor judgment. He was so blinded by his desire to win the Queen's favor that he had lost all perspective. He was a man adrift on an ocean of ambition, looking for any scrap of driftwood to cling to. He believed he was destined for greatness, and that only this one infuriating obstacle stood in his way, and a man that desperate, a man that blinded by a single desire, is the perfect mark. He is a grand and stately ship, sailing with a massive, gaping hole in its hull, just below the waterline. And across the city, a predator is beginning to circle, a woman with no title, no fortune, but a brilliant, ruthless mind, and a keen eye for exactly this kind of weakness. Now, let's leave the prince in his gilded echo chamber of frustrated ambition. Let his unhappiness be a low hum in the background as we drift to a very different part of Paris. We're not going to a palace this time, or even a grand townhouse. We find ourselves outside a modest, respectable building, and we slip through the door into a small borrowed apartment. The air here doesn't smell of roses or beeswax. It smells of damp wool, yesterday's bread, and a sharp, simmering ambition. Standing by the window, looking out at the same grey rooftops as the cardinal, but from a much lower vantage point, is a young woman. Her name is Jeanne de Valois-Saint-Remy, and soon she will be known to the world as the Comtesse de la Motte. She is not a classic beauty in the way the court painters would capture. Her features are a little too sharp, her mouth a little too thin. But her eyes are her weapon. They are not the soft, demure eyes of a court lady. They are sharp, assessing, and they miss nothing, and they miss nothing. They are the eyes of someone who has spent her entire life watching, listening, and learning how the world truly works behind its polished facade. You see, Jean's story is a strange one. She does, in fact, have a drop of royal blood in her veins. But it's a drop so diluted and so far removed from the source that it's almost meaningless. She was descended from an illegitimate son of King Henry II of France, from the Valois dynasty that had been replaced by the Bourbons a century and a half ago. Her family had the name, but none of the wealth or power that once went with it. They had fallen, generation by generation, into complete and utter poverty. As a child, Jean and her sister were literally beggars on the streets of Paris. Their trick was to appeal to the pity of wealthy passers-by, crying out, "Have charity for a poor orphan of the blood of the Valois." It was a good line. And one day it actually worked. A wealthy marquise heard her plea, took an interest, investigated her story, and was shocked to find it was true. This kind patroness took Jean under her wing, had her educated in a convent, and even managed to get her case presented before the royal court. As a result, the king himself granted Jean a small but respectable pension. She was officially, if distantly, recognized. But for Jean, this was not enough. It was an insult. A small pension felt like a pittance, a table scrap thrown to a dog with a fancy pedigree. She had tasted legitimacy, and now she was starving for the life she believed her blood entitled her to. She had a burning resentment for the system that had let her family to the top, by any means necessary. A little-known fact about her climb: her first step was a calculated marriage to a gendarme, a minor officer named Nicolas de la Motte. He wasn't rich, but he had a title. He called himself a count, and by marrying him, Jean could now style herself the Comtesse de la Motte. It sounded much better, much more important, than her own complicated name, and here's where historians get into their quiet, late-night arguments. What was truly driving Jean at this point? Was she a traumatized young woman, desperately trying to reclaim a lost legacy and secure her place in a world that had discarded her? Or was she a cold, calculating predator from the very beginning? A brilliant sociopath who saw the world as nothing more than a collection of locks waiting for her to craft the right key? We will likely never know for sure. What we do know is that she spent her time in Paris studying the court from a distance. She was a master of gossip. She understood the intricate web of alliances, rivalries, debts, and desires that made Versailles tick, and from her humble apartment, she hears the same whispers everyone else hears. The story of the fabulously wealthy, fabulously powerful Cardinal de Rohan, and his one great, pathetic weakness. His all-consuming desperation to win back the favor of the Queen. A plan begins to form in her brilliant, ruthless mind. The Cardinal is a locked treasure chest, and she believes she is about to forge the key. She doesn't know the Queen, she has never spoken to her, but she realizes, with a flash of cold genius, that she doesn't need to. She just needs the Cardinal to believe she does. Let's stay here in this small, borrowed apartment with Jean de la Motte, and watch the first gears of her intricate machine begin to turn. Her plan is still just a fragile blueprint in her mind, a high-wire act with no safety net. She needs a way in, a point of contact with the world of the Cardinal. Direct approach is out of the question. A woman of her dubious rank and small means can't just request an audience with the Prince of the Church. She needs a bridge. And so she begins her hunt, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet, patient work of a spider weaving the first anchor threads of its web. She begins to frequent the public spaces where the Cardinal's vast household might be found. The gardens of the Palais Royal, the cafes, even the churches. She is a master of appearing to be somewhere by accident. One day, you see her drop a handkerchief. Another, she seems to be struggling with a book. She is creating opportunities for chance encounters. Her target isn't the Cardinal himself, not yet. Her target is the periphery, the constellation of lesser figures who orbit the great man. And eventually she finds her mark. His name is Ray Torques de Valette, a fellow officer in her husband's regiment. He's a minor player, a man with a talent for mimicry, a flexible moral code, and a constant need for cash. To Jean, he is perfect. He is useful. She befriends him, charms him, and soon he is a regular visitor to her small apartment, captivated by this clever, ambitious countess who seems destined for greater things. He becomes her first, unwitting pawn. Her next move is even more audacious. She discovers that Cardinal de Rohan has a rather unusual interest: alchemy and the occult. He surrounds himself with a motley collection of mystics, fortune-tellers, and so-called magicians, one of whom was the infamous Count Cagliostro, a master charlatan of European renown. This is a fascinating and often overlooked detail of the story. While we picture the 18th century as the Age of Enlightenment, a time of science and reason, a deep fascination with the supernatural and the mystical still flowed just beneath the surface, even among the highest EC hellas of society. Rohan, a man of the church, was deeply invested in these pseudosciences, hoping to find in them a shortcut to power and influence. Jean sees this not as a strange hobby, but as a weakness to be exploited. She begins to drop hints to her new friends, including Ray Torques, that she too has certain connections, not to the Queen, not yet, but to the world of secrets and hidden knowledge. She subtly cultivates an aura of mystery. She knows things she shouldn't. She has insights that seem to come from nowhere. She is weaving an illusion, thread by delicate thread. The moment comes. Through one of the Cardinal's hangers-on, or perhaps even Cagliostro himself. Historians still debate the exact chain of introduction. Jean finally arranges a meeting. Not a formal audience, but a carefully staged chance encounter with the great man himself. She is presented to him as a woman of noble blood who has fallen on hard times, a Valois in need of patronage. And she plays her part to perfection. She is not a desperate beggar. She is proud, intelligent, and speaks of her tragic lineage with a captivating melancholy. She doesn't ask for much, just his help in presenting her case more forcefully at court. The Cardinal is intrigued. He is a man who enjoys the role of a magnanimous patron, especially to a woman with such a romantic and tragic backstory. He agrees to help. He has no idea that he is the one being helped right into the jaws of a trap. She now has her foot in the door. She has the Cardinal's attention. But this is only the first move in a much longer game. Her true objective is not his patronage, but his absolute trust. So she begins a slow, patient campaign. She visits him occasionally at his palace, always grateful, always charming. She never overplays her hand. She becomes a familiar, pleasant presence in his life. And as she gains his confidence, she begins, ever so subtly, to introduce the subject that she knows is never far from his mind, the one topic that consumes him above all others, the cold, unyielding silence of the Queen. Let the scene shift and settle into the soft, candlelit interior of the Cardinal's opulent study at the Palais Royal. You can almost smell the scent of old leather from 1,000 books, the faint, sweet aroma of beeswax candles, and the expensive wine sitting in a crystal decanter on a nearby table. Cardinal de Rohan is seated in a plush velvet armchair. Across from him, in a chair that seems just a little too large for her, sits Jean de la Motte. This is not their first meeting, nor their second. This is part of a careful, ongoing cultivation. Jean is a masterful conversationalist. She has been listening, learning, and now she begins to deploy her most powerful weapon. The carefully crafted lie. She doesn't start with a grand, unbelievable claim. She starts with a whisper, a hint, a morsel of feigned intimacy. One evening, after discussing her own mostly fabricated struggles at court, she lets out a soft sigh. She looks at the Cardinal with those sharp, intelligent eyes, now softened with a performance of sympathy. "Your Eminence," she might say, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is such a shame. The Queen, she speaks of you, you know." You can imagine the effect of these words on Rohan. It's like a sudden jolt of electricity. The Queen speaks of him. He leans forward, his entire being focused on this small woman in the oversized chair. She does. "Oh yes," Jean continues, looking down at her hands as if sharing a reluctant secret. She is not as cold as she appears. Her position forces her to maintain a certain distance. But she has a good heart. She told me herself how much she regrets this misunderstanding between you. This is the moment the hook is set. Rowan, a man starved for any sign of royal favor, devours the bait. He has no reason to doubt her. Why would this charming, unfortunate countess lie about something so specific? He is so desperate to believe it that he does her work for him, filling in the gaps, convincing himself. From this point on, Jean's visits become more frequent, and her stories more detailed. She becomes a secret channel, a ghost in the machine of Versailles, relaying messages that are never sent from a queen who is completely unaware of her existence. One week, she will arrive with a troubled look. The queen is so pleased with your recent sermon, she might confide, but she cannot show it. The king's ministers, they watch her so closely. Another week shall bring a happier, though equally fictitious, report. Her Majesty saw you in the gardens yesterday. She told me she thought you looked very distinguished. She is building a fantasy, a private reality just for the cardinal, where he is not a pariah, but a misunderstood hero, secretly appreciated by the monarch who publicly shuns him. It's a brilliant psychological manipulation. She is not just telling him what he wants to hear. She is telling him a story that confirms his own deepest sense of self-worth. Of course, the queen secretly admires him. One of the more bizarre, and often forgotten, elements of this deception involves Jean's manipulation of the cardinal's mystical beliefs. She would sometimes claim that her insights into the queen's thoughts were not just from conversations, but from a shared spiritual connection, a secret sympathy that only women of a certain sensitivity could understand. Some historical accounts even suggest she worked in concert with the charlatan Cagliostro, who would perform magical ceremonies for Rowan, confirming through smoke and mirrors that the queen's heart was indeed softening towards him. Whether Jean and Cagliostro were truly partners in crime or just opportunists exploiting the same weakness is a subject of historical debate, but the effect was the same. The cardinal was being attacked on two fronts: his emotional desperation and his superstitious gullibility. He becomes utterly dependent on Jean. She is his only source of hope, his private window into the queen's soul. He begins to give her money, large sums of money. At first, it's for her to maintain her position at court, a necessary expense for someone acting as his secret go-between. Then it's for her to distribute to the queen's favorite charities, a way for him to signal his generosity to the crown without appearing to be currying favor. Jean's lifestyle improves dramatically. She moves to a finer house, buys lavish gowns, and begins to live the life of the aristocrat she always believed she was. But the money is secondary. It's fuel. The real engine of her plan is the cardinal's complete and total trust. And for that, she needs to move beyond just telling stories. She needs to provide proof. The con is escalating. Jean's whispers and fireside confidences have built the foundation. But now the cardinal, like any man deeply invested in a fantasy, begins to crave something more tangible. He wants to hear it from the queen herself, so to speak. Jean, ever perceptive, anticipates this. She knows that her own spoken words, no matter how convincing, have a limited shelf life. She needs to produce something solid, something the cardinal can hold in his hands. Read and read in the lonely hours of the night. She needs a letter. This presents a significant problem. Jean is a woman of many talents, but forgery is not one of them. More importantly, she has no access to the queen's handwriting. She might have seen it on official documents, but she doesn't have a sample she can study and copy. She needs a specialist. And so we return to the first pawn in her game, the man with the flexible morals and the steady hand. Let's drift back to Jean's now much more fashionable apartment. Ray talks as a frequent guest, enjoying the fine wine and the elevated social standing that come to Cess in a circle. He is infatuated with her, blinded by her charm and her grand pronouncements about their shared future. He believes he is her rusted confidant, a co-conspirator in a grand adventure. He has no idea he is merely a tool, a high-quality pen she is about to pick up and use. This is a crucial turning point in the affair. It moves from a simple confidence trick into a full-blown conspiracy, involving forged documents and high treason. Jean has crossed a line from which there is no return. Her loyal and foolish forger has crossed it with her. He is now inextricably linked to her fate. He believes he is helping to unite a queen and her loyal servant. He is, in fact, forging the chains that will eventually drag them all down. A man waits, his heart filled with a nervous, hopeful excitement. The first letter is about to be delivered. Let the scented, gold-leafed letter travel across Paris in the hands of a discreet messenger. We arrive back at the Palais Royal in the Cardinal's private study. The air is thick with anticipation. Jean has been preparing him for this moment for weeks, telling him that the Queen felt moved to take a great risk, to finally reach out to him directly. When the letter arrives, Rowan handles it as if it were a holy relic. You watch him break the wax seal with a trembling hand. The paper crackles softly in the quiet room. He holds it up to the candlelight, and his eyes scan the delicate, looping script. The words are a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, crafted by Jean and penned by Ray Talks. They are vague enough to be safe, yet intimate enough to be intoxicating. This is not a one-time event. This is the beginning of a correspondence. Every few weeks another letter arrives. Each one deepens the illusion. They become the central drama of the Cardinal's life. He lives for them. He keeps them in a special rosewood box, tied with a silk ribbon. At night you can imagine him taking them out, reading them over and over again, dissecting every word, every turn of phrase, searching for hidden meanings, for reassurances of the Queen's growing affection. The letters are also a tool for Jean to solidify her control. If the Cardinal ever has a doubt, if he ever questions why the Queen still won't acknowledge him in public, Jean has a ready-made answer. "Did you not read her last letter?" she'll say with a concerned frown. She explained her caution. The Comte de Provence is watching her. The king is in a foul mood. We must be patient. The letters become the ultimate authority, a sacred text that Jean can interpret as she sees fit. And of course the letters always come with a cost. The Queen, Jean explains, has many charitable works she cannot fund through official channels. She needs cash to help a destitute noble family or to support a struggling artist. And who better to be her secret agent of generosity than the loyal Cardinal? Rowan, overjoyed at the opportunity to serve his Queen in any capacity, opens his coffers. The sums are enormous. He is not just buying letters. He is buying a role in the secret history of the monarchy, a history that exists only in his own mind and in the fertile imagination of Jean de la Motte. Here, a fascinating academic debate continues to this day. How could a man of Rowan's intelligence and experience, a man who navigated the treacherous waters of European diplomacy, be so thoroughly and completely duped? Some historians argue that he was simply a fool, a vain and gullible man whose arrogance was his undoing. Others take a more sympathetic view, suggesting that he was the victim of a form of psychological obsession, a folie à deux shared with the phantom Queen created by Jean. They argue that his desire was so powerful he created a blind spot the size of Paris itself. He wasn't just being tricked. He was an active participant in his own deception, because the fantasy was so much more present than the cold, lonely reality. Whatever the reason, the Cardinal is now fully submerged. He is in love with a ghost, a woman made of ink and paper. But even this is not enough. As his feelings for the phantom Queen deepen, he begins to yearn for more than just letters. He wants to hear her voice. He wants, just for a moment, to be in her presence. He begs Jean to arrange a meeting. This presents Jean with her most audacious challenge yet. How on earth do you produce a queen? The Cardinal's request-faced meeting is a challenge that would have stopped any lexicon artist in her tracks. But Jean de la Motte is not a lexicon artist. She sees this not as a risk, but as the ultimate opportunity to cement her control, produce a queen, of course. It's merely a matter of casting. And so Jean goes shopping, not for gowns or jewels, but for a face. She haunts the public gardens of Paris, the Palais Royal and the promenades, her sharp eyes scanning the crowds. She is looking for a specific type of woman. Young, with a certain graceful posture, a fair complexion, and most importantly, a passing resemblance to Marie Antoinette. And one day she finds her. A young woman, a milliner, or perhaps a lady of the evening, depending on which source you believe. Her name is Nicole de Oliva, and she has the right general look, the famous Habsburg nose, the tall figure. Whether she was a true doppelganger or simply close enough for a dark night is one of those questions historians love to debate. In the end, it didn't matter. She was available, and she was cheap. Jean approaches Nicole with a dazzling proposition. She tells her a story about a great lady, a very, very important lady at court, who wants to play a harmless prank on a certain nobleman. All Nicole has to do is dress up in a specific gown, stand in a garden for 2 minutes, hand the nobleman a rose, and say a few simple words. For this brief, one-act play, she will be paid a small fortune. Nicole, likely overwhelmed and seeing no real harm in it, agrees. She has no idea who she is supposed to be impersonating or who she is tricking. She is just an actress, hired for a single, mysterious performance. The stage is set. The chosen location, the gardens of Versailles itself, specifically in a secluded, shadowy area known as the Grove of Venus. The time, late at night, with only a sliver of moon to provide a little unreliable light. It is a scene straight out of an opera. You are there, a silent observer hidden in the deep shadows of a sculpted hedge. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and night blooming jasmine. You can hear the distant splash of a fountain and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. First, Jean arrives with the cardinal. He is trembling with a mixture of terror and ecstasy. He is about to meet his queen. Jean gives him his final instructions, like a director speaking to a nervous actor. He is to stay at a distance. He must not speak unless spoken to, and the meeting will be very, very brief. Her Majesty is taking a great risk. Then, out of the shadows at the far end of the path, a figure emerges. It is Nicole, dressed in a simple but elegant white muslin gown, a style the real queen was known to favor. She wears a wide-brimmed hat that casts her face in even deeper shadow. She looks, for all the world, like a ghost or a dream. The cardinal gasps. It is her. It must be. Nicole glides towards him. The cardinal, as instructed, bows low. He is so overcome he can barely breathe. She stops a few feet away, just as the moonlight catches the shape of her face. It is tantalizingly indistinct. She holds out a single perfect rose. The cardinal reaches for it, his hand shaking. And then she speaks the lines Jean has fed her. Just a few words whispered into the night. Accounts differ on what was said, but the most common version is that she murmured, "You may hope." Or perhaps, "You know what this means." Something ambiguous, powerful, and utterly thrilling to the man hearing it. She allows his hand to brush against hers for a fleeting second as he takes the rose. And then a fig edge of the grove and coughs discreetly. The signal, the meeting is over. Nicole turns and melts back into the shadows from which she came. The entire encounter lasts less than a minute. Jean quickly hustles the dazed and euphoric cardinal away. He clutches the rose to his chest as if it were the crown jewels. He has seen her. She has given him a token. All his doubts, if he had any left, are vaporized in the cool night air. The fantasy is now real, cemented by the scent of a single rose and the memory of a whisper in the dark. Let's follow the cardinal back from that moonlit grove. The world for him has fundamentally changed. The air in his carriage on the ride back to Paris feels lighter. The cobblestones seem to sing under the wheels. You are with him as he re-enters his study, the scene of so much anxious waiting. But there is no anxiety now, only a profound, luminous calm. He is a man who has seen a vision. He walks over to his desk and, with the reverence of a priest handling a sacred object, he takes the rose given to him by the Phantom Queen. It is already starting to wilt slightly in the warm night air, but to him, it is the most beautiful object on earth. He doesn't place it in water. That would be too temporary. Instead, he finds a heavy, leather-bound volume, a book of devotional poetry. Perhaps, and carefully, he opens it to the middle, a fragrant bookmark in the story of his own secret joy. He closes the book, pressing the flower into a two-dimensional memory, a permanent token of his one perfect minute. From this moment on, Cardinal de Rohan is no longer just a mark for Jean de Lamotte. He is her creation. He is a puppet, and she holds every single string. His gratitude towards her is boundless, almost religious in its fervor. She did not just introduce him to a countess. She performed a miracle. She parted the waters of royal disapproval and allowed him to walk through. His purse is now completely open to her. Any amount she asks for any reason, is his pleasure to provide. He showers her with money and gifts, not as a payment, but as an offering. And here the story takes another strange, mystical turn. To further solidify the cardinal's belief, Jean insists they consult the great magician Cagliostro. You can imagine the scene. Another candlelit room, this one filled with the strange paraphernalia of an alchemist's laboratory, bubbling alembics, charts of the zodiac, and the faint smell of sulphur and incense. Cagliostro, a master showman, would perform a reading on the event. He might have gazed into a crystal, or a bowl of water, and with a voice heavy with mystery, he would confirm what the cardinal already believed. "I see a great queen," he would murmur, and her heart opens to a noble prince of the church. The rose was a sign. The path is clear. For Rowan, this was scientific proof, a validation from the world of spirits that his fantasy was real. He is, for all intents and purposes, a fish on a line. He has not only taken the bait, but has swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker. He swims now only where Jean directs him, convinced it is his own glorious destiny. And this is where the quiet, late-night debate among historians truly ignites. Was he simply a fool? A man whose vanity and ambition was so colossal that they eclipsed his common sense? Or was something deeper at play? Some argue that Rowan was, on some level, a willing participant in the fantasy. The reality of his situation being a powerful, important man who was utterly despised by his queen for a past mistake was perhaps so humiliating, so unbearable, that he actively chose to believe in a beautiful lie. He wasn't just being deceived. He was co-authoring his own delusion because it was the only story he could bear to live in. Whatever the psychological truth, the practical result is the same. The cardinal is now completely malleable. He believes with every fiber of his being that he is the queen's secret confidant, her silent partner, her most trusted, if unaccountable, servant. He is ready. He would do anything for her. He would move mountains. He would slay dragons. He would, for instance, undertake a task of enormous expense and secrecy, if he were only asked. Knows that the time for the first phase of her plan, the grooming of the mark, is over. It is time to introduce the ultimate prize. It is time to talk about diamonds. Let the memory of that pressed rose and the scent of incense fade away. We drift now from the cardinal's fevered mind back to the patient, methodical chill of Jean d'Armont's ambition. She has built an elaborate, invisible theater for an audience of one. The stage is set, the lead actor is in costume and knows his motivation. Now, it is time for the main prop to be brought out from the wings. You are with Jean as she visits the cardinal again, but this time, her mood is different. She is not bringing him a cheerful, ghost-written letter. She wears a look of gentle, shared concern. She sighs. She seems reluctant to speak. She is, of course, playing a part, and she is playing it brilliantly. The cardinal, ever sensitive to the moods of his secret queen, immediately senses that something is amiss. He leans forward, his face set with worry. His Her Majesty unwell. "Oh, no, Your Eminence. Not unwell," Jean says, her voice a soft murmur. "Just burdened. There is something she desires, something of great beauty, but the circumstances, they are so delicate." She lets the sentence hang in the air, a baited hook shimmering in the candlelight. Rowan naturally bites. Desires, what is it? If there is anything I can do, anything at all. Jean looks at him, a flicker of feigned admiration in her eyes. "You are too good, Cardinal, too loyal. But this is a matter of great expense and secrecy." She pauses, then leans in as if sharing a profound state secret. "Have you heard of the necklace? The one made by Beaumont and Bassenge?" A flicker of recognition crosses the cardinal's face. Of course, he has heard of it. Everyone at court has heard of the absurdly, impossibly expensive necklace that the jewelers had been trying to unload for years. It was a court joke, a white elephant made of diamonds. He also knows, as everyone knows, that the Queen had publicly and repeatedly refused to buy it. But Jean is ready for this. "Oh," she says with a knowing, conspiratorial little smile. "That is the story for the public, for the king, for the tiresome ministers who count every SOU. But a woman's heart, that is a different matter." She goes on to spin a magnificent tale. "The Queen," she explains, "secretly, desperately covets the necklace. She feels it is her right as Queen of France to own such a masterpiece. But she cannot possibly ask the king for it, and he would accuse her of frivolity. She cannot be seen buying it herself, as it would cause a public scandal. She is trapped," Jean whispers, her voice filled with manufactured pathos. "She wants it so badly, but she cannot acquire it. If only she had a friend, a discreet, powerful, and utterly loyal friend who could act on her behalf. Someone who could acquire the necklace for her, secretly, with the understanding that she would pay him back in installments, from her own private allowance." You can almost see the gears turning in the cardinal's head. The idea settles into his mind, and it is a perfect fit. It makes sense of everything. It explains the secret letters, the moonlit meeting. This is the heroic task he has been waiting for his entire life. He will not be buying a piece of jewelry. He will be rescuing his queen from a secret sorrow. He will be her champion, her secret financier. It is the ultimate act of chivalry, a quest worthy of a knight from an old romance. Historians still marvel at the audacity of this particular lie. Jean took a well-known fact, the Queen's rejection of the necklace, and simply inverted it. She claimed it was all a clever piece of public theatre, a cover for the Queen's true desire. And Rowan, a man who now believed in phantom letters and garden encounters with impersonators, found this to be the most logical explanation in the world. He was so deep inside the fantasy that it had its own internal consistency, its own dream logic that was more powerful than any fact. He looks at Jean, his eyes shining with a newfound purpose. The ambition to be Prime Minister is still there, but it is now fused with this romantic, heroic quest. "Say no more, Countess," he declares, his voice filled with emotion. "Her Majesty shall have her necklace. You may inform her that I will consider it my life's greatest honor to be her humble agent in this matter." He is beaming. He feels 10 feet tall. He is, at this moment, the happiest, most important man in France. He has no idea he has just volunteered to walk, with his eyes wide open, directly into financial and social ruin. Let the cardinal's triumphant declaration hang in the air of his study, echoing with the ghosts of his own ambition. Now it is time for the practicalities. Jean, ever the meticulous stage manager, guides him through the next steps. It must all be handled with the utmost discretion. He is not to approach the jewelers himself, not at first. That would be too clumsy to direct. No, she, the Countess, will act as the initial go-between, the shuttle diplomat in this transaction of staggering value. You find yourself back in the jeweler's workshop. Omer and Bass end just sitting amidst their beautiful, useless treasures, their faces a portrait of refined despair. Their entire fortune is still tied up in that one magnificent, unsellable necklace. They have all but given up hope. Then, one afternoon, the door opens and in sweeps the Comtesse de la Motte, Jean de Valois, a woman they have never seen before. She introduces herself with an air of immense, yet understated importance. She does not mention the Queen, not at first. She speaks in hypotheticals. She has a patron, she explains, a very great personage at court who is interested in acquiring the necklace. But this personage requires absolute secrecy. She is there to open a preliminary and completely deniable negotiation. The jurors are, of course, immediately suspicious. Who is this woman? Why all the secrecy? But they are also drowning men, and she has just thrown them a rope, however thin it might be. They listen. Jean is a masterful negotiator. She knows the history of the necklace, its original price, and the jeweler's desperation. She talks numbers, payment schedules, and conditions. She is cool, professional, and utterly convincing. She leaves them with a tantalizing offer and a promise to return with more concrete details. For the next few weeks, a strange negotiation unfolds. Jean shuttles between the jeweler's workshop and the cardinal's palace. To the jewelers, she is the mysterious agent of an unknown buyer. To the cardinal, she is the faithful messenger of the queen. She plays the two sides against each other perfectly. When the jewelers question the arrangement, she hints at the immense power of her client and the dire consequences of offending them. She speaks of the queen's need for caution and the jeweler's stubbornness on the price. Finally, the day arrives for the cardinal to reveal himself. Jean arranges a meeting at her own home, which is now a lavishly appointed townhouse, paid for by the cardinal's earlier gifts. You are there, a silent witness in the drawing room. The two jewelers arrive, nervous and full of questions. And then, the door opens, and in walks Cardinal de Rohan, Grand Almoner of France, Prince of the Church. The jewelers are stunned into silence. This is a buyer beyond their wildest dreams. All their doubts about the mysterious countess vanish. She is clearly a woman with powerful connections. Rohan plays his part with a grand, princely air. He confirms that he is indeed the purchaser acting on behalf of a certain person. He doesn't name the queen. He doesn't name the queen. He doesn't name the queen. He doesn't need to. He looks the jewelers in the eye and speaks of the importance of this transaction and the absolute necessity of discretion. They are to speak to no one about this. All future communications will go through the countess. And here's a small, almost comical detail that some historians love to point out. During these negotiations, Jean convinced the cardinal to try to haggle the price down. So you have this bizarre scene. A prince of the church, acting on behalf of the Queen of France, or so he thinks, haggling with two jewelers over the price of the most expensive necklace in the world. He manages to get them to lower the price from 2 million livres to 1.6 million, to be paid in for large installments over 2 years. He is immensely proud of this. He believes he has not only served his queen, but has also saved her a considerable amount of money. He sees it as a sign of his excellent business acumen. In reality, he has just personally guaranteed a debt that would be equivalent to tens, if not hundreds, of millions of dollars today. The deal is struck. The jewelers are ecstatic. The cardinal is euphoric. And Jean is a cool, calm vortex at the center of this storm of greed and delusion. She has brokered a phantom deal. She has sold a necklace that no one is actually buying. She has secured a royal IOU from a man with no authority to give it. The hardest part of her plan is over. All that's left is the paperwork. Let the echoes of that handshake sealing the impossible deal fade into a pregnant silence. The negotiation is complete, the terms agreed upon. But in a transaction of this magnitude, a gentleman's agreement is not enough. The jewelers, while overjoyed, are still businessmen. They need something in writing. They need a contract with the cardinal. They need a guarantee from the ultimate buyer he is supposedly representing. They need the Queen's approval on paper. This request, which would seem to be an insurmountable obstacle, is met by Jean with a calm, knowing smile. Of course, she assures them. Her Majesty understands the necessity of such formalities. A document will be prepared. Jean, however, frames it as another move in their elaborate game of courtly intrigue. She dictates the terms of the agreement, the purchase price, the schedule of payments. She explains that the Queen has personally reviewed these terms and finds them acceptable. All that is needed is her royal assent, written in the margins, a simple phrase to seal the deal. You can picture Ray Talks, his quill hovering over the expensive vellum. The scent of fresh ink fills the room. He is no longer just mimicking a signature. He is authorizing a transaction that could bankrupt a small country. Under Jean's careful instruction, he writes the words of approval in the margin of the contract. And then he prepares to sign it with the now practiced flourish. Marie Antoinette de France. But here, Jean makes a small, almost imperceptible adjustment to the plan, a stroke of evil genius. She tells Ray Talks to stop. Signing with the full name, she explains, is what the Queen does on public, state documents. For a secret, private transaction like this, she uses a more discreet, almost coded signature. Just the words, having no reason to doubt her, carefully pens a simpler signature. This is a masterstroke of deception for two reasons. First, as we know, the real queen did sign with just her given name. So through sheer cunning and a bit of luck, Jean had stumbled upon a more authentic-looking forgery than their previous efforts. But second, and more importantly, it was a subtle difference. If the forgery were ever questioned, she could claim that the cardinal, not being in the queen's innermost circle, simply wouldn't know about this private signature, making his acceptance of it all the more believable. It was a lie wrapped in a layer of plausible deniability. Whether Jean knew the real queen's signing habits, or simply made an incredibly lucky guess, is a point that historians still debate with a certain degree of awe or her sheer audacity. The document is now ready. It looks official. It has the terms, the approval, and the signature, all sealed with a borrowed crest that looks close enough to the royal arms to pass a cursory inspection. Jean takes the contract and arranges the final presentation. The scene is the cardinal's residence. Beaumont and Versailles arrive, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. The cardinal receives them, radiating an air of solemn importance. And then Jean de la Motte enters, holding the precious contract as if it were a sacred text. She presents it to the jewelers. "From Her Majesty," she says simply. They unfold the document. Their eyes scan the terms, and then move to the margin. They see the words of approval. They see the signature, Marie Antoinette. It is being presented to them by a prince of the church, who stands there nodding gravely, confirming its authenticity with his silent presence. What reason could they possibly have to doubt it? Any lingering suspicions are washed away in a tidal wave of relief and anticipated profit. This single piece of paper is the key that will unlock them from their diamond prison. They accept it without question. The trap is now fully set, and the bait has been officially and legally taken. The necklace now, for all intents and purposes, belongs to the cardinal. The only thing left is the delivery. The forged contract now rests securely in the jeweler's possession, a ticking time bomb of ink and lies. For Beaumont and Versailles, it is a guarantee of immense wealth. For the cardinal, it is a secret covenant with his queen. For Jean, it is the master key to everything she has ever wanted. The only remaining piece of the puzzle is the physical transfer of the necklace itself. Jean, ever the careful director, choreographs this final scene with meticulous detail. The transfer cannot happen at the jeweler's shop, too public. It cannot happen at the cardinal's palace, too risky. It must be a neutral location, a place of discretion. Her own house, of course, is the perfect stage. The day arrives, a grey Parisian afternoon. You are a silent observer in Jean's lavishly decorated drawing room. The jewelers Beaumont and Versailles arrive first. They are not empty-handed. They carry a large, ornate casket made of plate and bound with brass. It is surprisingly heavy. Inside, nestled on a bed of deep blue velvet, lies the cause of all this trouble. The river of diamonds, the necklace. Even in the diffuse afternoon light filtering through the tall windows, it seems to pulse with a cold, inner fire. It is so brilliant it almost hurts to look at. The jewelers place the casket on a table and wait. They are nervous, fidgeting with their cuffs. This is the culmination of years of work and worry. Soon, Cardinal de Rohan is announced. He enters the room, his face a mask of solemn triumph. He looks less like a man making a purchase and more like a high priest performing a sacred rite. He walks over to the table and gazes down at the necklace. For a long moment, the only sound in the room is the soft ticking of a mantel clock. He is looking at the physical manifestation of his queen's secret desire, the price of his own redemption. He nods slowly, to no one in particular. Then he turns to the jewelers. "You have done well," he says, his voice low and resonant. "Her Majesty will be pleased." He then formally, and with great ceremony, accepts the necklace on her behalf. The jewelers bow, their faces flooded with relief. The great white elephant has finally been sold. They hand over the key to the casket and, with a final series of bows, they depart, leaving the cardinal alone with his prize. But he is not alone for long. A few moments later, a side door opens and a man enters. He is dressed in the discreet livery of a court messenger. He bows deeply to the cardinal. "I have come from the queen," he says, his voice respectful and low. This, of course, is not a court messenger. It is Jean's husband, Nicolas de la Motte, or perhaps the forger Ray Tox de Villette, or pardon, he is a bona fide agent of the crown. The messenger explains that he has been sent to collect the necklace and deliver it directly, and secretly, to the Queen at Versailles. This makes perfect sense to Rowan. Of course, he wouldn't be allowed to present it to her himself in public. The whole point was secrecy. He, the noble knight, has procured the dragon's treasure. Now, the humble squire must carry it back to the castle. With a final lingering look at the glittering prize, the cardinal locks the casket. He then hands the heavy box and its key to the messenger. He is beaming with a sense of profound accomplishment. He has done it. He has fulfilled his quest. He pictures the Queen, alone in her chambers at Versailles, opening the box, her face lighting up with a secret, grateful joy. A joy that he and he alone has provided. The messenger bows again and backs out of the room, carrying the casket. The cardinal watches him go, a serene, beatific smile on his face. He is at the absolute peak of his life's ambition. He has secured the Queen's favor in the most spectacular way imaginable. All he has to do now is wait for her secret, grateful acknowledgement, and figure out how to pay the first installment of 400,000 livres. But that is a problem for another day. For now, he is a hero, and Cardinal de Rohan will never, ever see it again. The messenger does not go to Versailles. The heavy casket does not travel the tree-lined road to the Queen's private apartments. Its journey is much shorter. You follow the discreetly dressed men, Jean's husband, Nicolas, through a few twisting Parisian back streets until you arrive back at the very house he just left. He enters through a rear door, and you follow him into a small, sparsely furnished back room. The glamour of the drawing room is gone. Here, there is only a sturdy wooden table, 2 chairs, and a single, sputtering oil lamp that casts long, dancing shadows on the bare walls. Jean is there waiting. Her expression is not one of triumph or excitement. It is the cool, focused look of a master craftsman about to begin a delicate and important job. Nicholas sets the heavy casket on the table with a solid thud. For a moment, they both just look at it. This box contains the culmination of months of patient, brilliant, and treasonous work. It contains a fortune that could make them kings and queens of their own private world. Nicholas, his hands trembling slightly with greed and adrenaline, fumbles with the key. The lock gives a loud click in the quiet room. He lifts the heavy lid. And there it is, the necklace. Released from the polite fiction of the drawing room. Here in this stark, honest space, it seems almost obscenely bright. It drinks the meager lamplight and throws it back 100 feet, filling the small room with a frantic, cold sparkle. It is the most beautiful thing either of them has ever seen. Nicholas gasps. He reaches out a hand to touch it, but Jean is quicker. Don't, she says, her voice sharp and low. It is not a jewel. It is a quarry. She does not see a masterpiece of the jeweler's art. She sees 647 individual, negotiable assets. She sees a pile of rocks that must be broken down and laundered. From a small bag, she produces her tools. And they are not the delicate, precise instruments of a jeweler. They are crude. A pair of sturdy pliers. A small, sharp knife, perhaps a letter opener. A heavy cloth to muffle the sound. This is not to be a careful disassembly. This is to be a butchering. And this is where the historical record becomes a frantic, finger-pointing argument. Who was the chief vandal? Did they do the work themselves, with their clumsy, amateur tools? Or did they, as some sources suggest, hire a discreet, underworld jeweler who knew how to deconstruct such a piece without damaging the stones? We will likely never know for sure. But the image of Jean and her husband, alone in that room, methodically destroying a work of art worth more than a fleet of warships, is a powerful one. You watch as Nicholas, guided by Jean's cold instructions, takes the pliers. He finds the first link, the first delicate setting of gold and platinum that holds a large pear-shaped diamond in place. He hesitates for a second, then he squeezes. There is a terrible grating sound, The soft metal groans, complains, and then gives way. The first diamond is free. It falls onto the dark wood of the table with a soft clatter, looking suddenly smaller and more anonymous now that it is ripped from the context of its glorious whole. They work through the night. It is a slow, brutal process. One by one, they pry the stones from their settings, the larger pendants first, then the smaller chains of diamonds, and finally the tassels. They work in silence, the only sounds being the scraping groan of metal, the occasional sharp breath, and the soft tick of the loose gems as they are sorted into piles on the table. Here's a strange detail of the time. Their primary method for separating real diamonds from the paste fakes that were common was often a simple, crude scratch test against glass or a harder stone like a topaz. They were flying blind, trusting that the king's jewelers hadn't slipped a fake into the mix. By dawn, the work is done. The magnificent necklace, the pride of Beaumont and Basse-Enge, is gone forever. In its place on the table is a mangled, twisted skeleton of precious metal, and a series of glittering piles of loose diamonds, sorted by size. The soul of the piece has been murdered. Only the cash value remained. Jean knew that selling such a recognizable collection of stones in Paris would be suicide. The larger, more distinctive diamonds had to leave the country. Nicholas was tasked with taking them to London, the world's other great hub of the diamond trade, where they could be sold more anonymously. The smaller stones they would try to fence, one or two at a time, through discreet dealers in Paris. The operation now moves from a confidence game to international smuggling. As the first rays of the morning sun filter through the grimy window, the cardinal is likely still sleeping, dreaming a hero's dreams of his grateful queen. And in this back room, Jean de la Motte is not dreaming. She is counting carats, her mind already on to the next, and most dangerous, phase of her plan. Let the image of those loose diamonds, glittering like a pile of frozen tears, slowly dissolve. We leave the conspirators to their dangerous work of laundering a fortune, and we shift our focus. Weeks turn into a few months. The Parisian winter gives way to a damp, uncertain spring, and in the workshop of Beaumont and Basse-Enge, a seed of anxiety, planted long ago, is beginning to sprout. The first installment on the necklace is due on July 31st, 1785, a staggering sum of 400,000 livres. The jewelers are not worried. Not really. They have a contract guaranteed by a prince of the church and signed by the Queen herself. Their money is safe. The date is merely a formality. But July 31st comes and goes, and the money does not arrive. A day of silence turns into a week. Beaumont and Basse-Enge tell themselves there must be a simple explanation. A delay in the royal finances, a court holiday, an oversight. They send a polite, discreet note to the Comtesse de la Motte, the designated intermediary. Her reply is slow to arrive, and when it does, it is a masterpiece of elegant evasion. The Queen's private funds are temporarily entangled in some bureaucratic red tape. Her Majesty sends her apologies and asks for their patience. It is a small delay, nothing more. The jewelers, wanting to believe, accept this explanation. But another week passes, then another. Their anxiety begins to curdle into a low-grade panic. They send another note to the Countess, this one slightly more insistent. Jean's reply is even more elaborate. She spins a story about a secret political struggle within the court. The king's finance minister is being difficult, she claims. The Queen must move cautiously. To press the matter now would be to risk exposing the entire secret arrangement, which would bring Her Majesty's wrath down upon them all. She is, in effect, using the jeweler's own desire for discretion as a weapon against them. And all this time she is, of course, frantically trying to extract more money from the cardinal. She goes to him with a troubled face. The Queen is having some temporary difficulty, she explains. She is so embarrassed. She needs a little help to make the first payment to the jewelers, just until her own funds are released. Rowan, still fronting on a cloud of self-congratulation, gives her what he can. He manages to scrape together a sum of around 30,000 livres, a fortune to a normal person, but a pittance against the 400,000 livre debt. Jean takes this money. She does not, however, give it to the jewelers. Some historians believe she gave them an even smaller fraction of it, just enough to keep them quiet for a little longer. Most of it simply vanishes into her own pockets. The jewelers are now in an impossible position. They are owed a colossal amount of money, but they have been sworn to secrecy. The person who owes them the money is, they believe, the Queen of France, and the only person they are allowed to speak to is a charming but increasingly evasive countess. Their nights are sleepless. They pace their workshops, staring at their empty ledgers. The beautiful necklace is gone, and so is their money. They are trapped in a nightmare of polite, deferential silence. This period of the story is a masterclass in what spies and interrogators call stalling. Jean is a virtuoso of the art. She invents excuses, feigns illnesses, creates fictional court intrigues, and plays on the jeweler's surgical precision. But even she knows this cannot last forever. Her web of lies is stretched to the breaking point. The cardinal is running out of ready cash. Her husband's sales of the diamonds in London are yielding less than they had hoped. The clock is ticking. Finally, Beaumont and Bassange decide they can wait no longer. They have been patient. They have been discreet. And they are on the verge of bankruptcy. They make a fateful decision. They will bypass the countess. They will bypass the countess. They will bypass the cardinal. They will go to the one person who can solve this problem with the stroke of a pen. They will seek an audience with the Queen herself. Let's travel now with the two jurors on the most nerve-wracking carriage ride of their lives. The road from Paris to Versailles is usually a place for pleasantries, for observing the gentle French countryside. But for Beaumont and Bassange, every clatter of the wheels on the road is a countdown to a moment of supreme, terrifying awkwardness. They are about to break the cardinal rule of their entire arrangement. They arrive at the palace, that glittering labyrinth where we began our story. They are not grand aristocrats, so gaining an audience is not a simple matter. They must use their official title, jewelers to the crown, to petition for a brief meeting. After a long, anxious wait in a gilded antechamber, surrounded by courtiers who eye them with cool curiosity, they are finally granted access. Not to the Queen herself, that would be too direct, but to her principal lady-in-waiting, the eminently respectable Madame Campan. You are in the room, a quiet, sun-drenched private office in the Queen's apartments. Madame Campan is a woman who has seen everything the court has to offer. She is polite, professional, and not easily flustered. The two jewelers are ushered in. They are pale, and their hands are fidgeting with the brims of their hats. Beaumont, the senior partner, clears his throat. He begins by apologizing profusely for the intrusion, for breaking the requested secrecy. But the matter, he explains, is of the utmost urgency. He then produces a note. It is not the contract itself. That would be too accusatory. It is a politely worded invoice, a simple statement of the 1.6 million livre price for the diamond necklace, with a note at the bottom about the first payment being regrettably overdue. He hands it to Madame Campan. Would you be so kind, he asks, his voice barely a whisper, as to present this to Her Majesty. Madame Campan takes the note. She reads it. A look of complete and utter bewilderment crosses her face. She reads it a second time. She looks up at the two nervous men standing before her. A necklace, she says, her voice a mixture of confusion and disbelief. For 1.6 million livres. Gentlemen, you must be mistaken. Her Majesty refused this necklace years ago. I was there myself. She has no interest in it. It is the jeweler's turn to be bewildered. This is not the reaction they expected. They thought there might be a royal reprimand for their impatience, or perhaps an apology for the delay. This flat, unequivocal denial is something they are completely unprepared for. Bassange, the younger and more impulsive of the two, speaks up. But madame, he stammers, we have the contract. This makes the situation even more confusing for Madame Campan. She knows the Queen's finances. She knows her recent purchases. A transaction of this magnitude is impossible. It could not happen without her knowledge. A signed contract. She repeats, her brow furrowed. That is not possible. Perhaps you could show it to me, but the jewelers have left the contract and they're safe in Paris. They didn't want to risk carrying it. A wave of cold red begins to wash over them. They have been so sure for so long. But the calm, confident certainty of this high-ranking court official is deeply unsettling. They try to explain. They speak of the secret nature of the deal, of the intermediary, the Cardinal de Rohan. At the mention of Rohan's name, a flicker of something, perhaps understanding, perhaps suspicion, crosses Madame Campin's face. She knows of the Cardinal's long-standing disgrace with the Queen. The idea that Marie Antoinette would use her most public enemy as a secret agent to buy a piece of jewelry is not just unlikely. It is fundamentally absurd. The very foundation of the jeweler's story is built on a political impossibility. A question that scholars still ponder is why the jewelers, who surely knew of the Queen's disdain for Rohan, didn't find this part of the story suspicious from the very beginning. The most likely answer is that their own financial desperation made them willing to believe in anything. Madame Campin realizes that something is terribly wrong here. This is not a simple matter of a late payment. This is a tangle of misunderstanding, or worse, of deceit, that is far beyond her authority to unravel. She promises the jewelers that she will speak to the Queen immediately. She dismisses them with a polite but firm gesture. Bulmer and Basenge bow their way out of the room, their minds reeling. They came to Versailles seeking payment, gut-wrenching suspicion that they have been the victims of a fraud so colossal, so audacious that it defies imagination. Let the two terrified jewelers recede, carrying their newfound red back to Paris. We will stay here, in the perfumed, sunlit apartments of Versailles, and wait for the inevitable collision. Madame Campin, a woman of duty and discretion, does exactly as she promised. She waits for the appropriate moment, a quiet time after the public rituals of the day are complete, and she approaches the Queen. You are with Marie Antoinette in her private library, a small, beautiful room filled with books bound in blue silk. She is perhaps reading a letter, or looking over a new design for the gardens at her private retreat, the Petit Trianon. She is in her own world, a world that, for the past several months, has been blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding in her name. Madame Campin enters. She curtsies. Her expression is serious, and the Queen immediately notices it. "What is it, Campin?" she asks, putting aside her papers. "You look as though you've seen a ghost." "Your Majesty," Madame Campin begins, choosing her words with extreme care. A rather perplexing matter has arisen. The jewelers, Bulmer and Basenge, were here. They came to inquire about a payment for a diamond necklace. Marie Antoinette looks up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "That necklace again," she says with an exasperated sigh. "How many times must I tell those men no? I thought we were finished with this years ago. Send them away. Tell them my decision is final." She thinks it's just another clumsy, desperate sales pitch. But Madame Campin presses on. "Your Majesty, I fear it is more complicated than that. They were not here to sell it to you. They believe you have already purchased it. Secretly, through the agency of the Cardinal de Rohan." You can almost feel the temperature in the room drop. The Queen stares at her lady-in-waiting as if she's just started speaking in a foreign language. Every name in that sentence is a shock. The necklace she explicitly rejected. A secret purchase. And the involvement of the one man at court she despises more than any other. The combination of ideas is so ludicrous, so completely nonsensical that for a moment, she doesn't even know how to react. "Rohan," she finally says, her voice a mixture of disbelief and contempt. "You are telling me that Bulmer and Basenge believe that I employed the Cardinal de Rohan to buy that vulgar piece of jewelry for me. They claim to have a contract, Your Majesty," Campin replies quietly. "They say it is signed by you. This is the final, incomprehensible piece of the puzzle. A forgery. Someone has not only used her name, but has forged her signature on a legal document for an astronomical sum. The affair has just crossed a critical threshold in the Queen's mind. It is no longer a bizarre misunderstanding or a piece of court gossip. It is a crime, a direct attack on her name, her honor, and the authority of the Crown." And here is a small but deeply human detail that is often lost in the grand sweep of the story. The Queen's immediate reaction was not just anger, but a kind of profound, wounded confusion. Why would anyone do this? What was the motive? The sheer strangeness of the plot, the bizarre choice of the cardinal as a pawn, made it difficult for her to grasp. She had spent her entire adult life in the artificial bubble of Versailles, and while she was no stranger to court intrigue, the raw, street-level criminality of a confident scheme was something entirely outside her experience. She questions Madame Camp and relentlessly. Did the jewelers say who they negotiated with? Was it the cardinal himself? Did they mention any other names? But Campan can only report the little she was told. The name of the Comtesse d'Aumont has not yet entered the picture. All the Queen knows is that the jewelers think she owes them a fortune, and that the odious Cardinal de Rohan is somehow at the center of it all. Her mind is racing. The implications are horrifying. If this story were to become public, who would believe her? She, with her well-known love for fashion and jewelry, and her reputation for extravagance. And Rohan, a prince of the church. It would be her word against his. The potential for a scandal of epic proportions is suddenly, terrifyingly clear. She realizes she cannot handle this alone. This is no longer a private matter. Let the quiet confusion in the Queen's library slowly build into a storm. Marie Antoinette, her mind reeling with the impossible news, goes directly to her husband, King Louis XVI. We find them not in the grand public chambers, but in the king's private study, a room that reflects his personality more than any other. It is less a royal office and more the workshop of a gentleman hobbyist, filled with maps, astronomical charts, and his famous collection of locks and keys, which he enjoyed making and fixing himself. You see the king, a large, somewhat awkward man, listening with a patient, furrowed brow as his wife explains the bizarre story. The necklace, the jewelers, the forged signature, and at the center of it all, the Cardinal de Rohan. For Louis, a man who prized order, honesty, and clear lines of authority, the story is an affront to everything he believes in. He is not a brilliant political strategist, but he has a solid, if sometimes inflexible, sense of justice, especially when they touched his wife's honor, were not matters for quiet negotiation. They were crimes to be punished. The decision is made. The cardinal must be summoned. He must be confronted here at Versailles in the heart of the monarchy he has so grievously insulted. The day is August 15th, 1785. It is the Feast of the Assumption, one of the most important holy days on the Catholic calendar and a major state occasion at Versailles. The palace is thronged with courtiers in their finest silks and velvets. Cardinal de Rohan is in his element. He is scheduled to celebrate the solemn mass before the entire court in the royal chapel. He is dressed in his magnificent pontifical robes, the rich scarlet silks shimmering in the candlelight of the antechamberess, important and closer than ever to the heart of power. He is still blissfully unaware of the abyss that is about to open up beneath his feet. Just before the service is set to begin, a royal page approaches him. The king and queen request his presence in their private chambers. Immediately, Rohan's heart leaps. This is it, the moment of his public reconciliation. The queen, having secretly received her necklace, is finally ready to acknowledge him, to welcome him back into her favor on this most holy of days. He smooths his robes, composes his face into an expression of humble gratitude, and follows the page. He is led into the king's study. The king is there. The queen is there, standing by the window, her back mostly to him. A few key government ministers are also present, their faces grim and unreadable. This is not the warm, private meeting he was expecting. The atmosphere is glacial. The king speaks first, his voice flat and cold. "My cousin," he says, using the formal address for a high-ranking nobleman, "what is this I hear of a diamond necklace you have purchased in the Queen's name?" The cardinal smiles, a confident, knowing smile. "Sire," he replies, "I was happy to be of service to Her Majesty. I had no idea that the affair had already reached your ears." He believes he is playing his part in the final scene of their secret drama, the moment when all is revealed and he is thanked for his discretion. The king holds out a copy of the contract. "Did you authorize this purchase?" "Yes, sire," Rohan says proudly. "And who gave you your commission?" The king asks, his voice dangerously quiet. I was honored to receive my instructions directly from the Queen, Rowan declares, burying his head slightly towards Marie Antoinette. At this, the Queen, who has been silent until now, whips around from the window. Her face is pale with fury. "From me, sir?" she says, her voice trembling with rage. "You received instructions from me. I have not spoken a word to you in 8 years. Where are these instructions? Show them to me." The cardinal is utterly poleaxed. This is not how the scene was supposed to play out. He stammers. He looks from the furious queen to the stony-faced king. He realizes with a dawning, sickening horror that something has gone terribly wrong. He reaches into the pocket of his robes and pulls out his treasured collection of letters, the ones he keeps in the rosewood box. His proof. "I have the correspondence from Her Majesty," he says, his voice losing its confident tone. He hands a letter to the king. Louis takes it and glances at the signature. Marie Antoinette de France. He looks at his wife. "This is not the Queen's handwriting," he says flatly, "and she does not sign in this manner." The world dissolves around Cardinal de Rohan. The letters are forgeries, the entire correspondence, the foundation of his secret reality for the past year, is a lie. He looks at the Queen's face, her eyes blazing with genuine, unfeigned anger, and he finally understands. He has not been her secret agent. He has been a fool, an epic, legendary, world-class fool. He has been played from the very beginning. The blood drains from his face. He can barely stand. In his magnificent scarlet robes, looks for all the world like a man who has just been told his entire life is a cheap theatrical production and he is the only one in the audience. Let the cardinal stand there for a moment longer, suspended in the horrifying silence of the king's study. The beautiful, intricate fantasy he has lived in for the past year has just been shattered into a million pieces. The air crackles with the Queen's fury and the king's cold, implacable judgment. Rowan, in his splendid robes, looks utterly deflated, a punctured balloon of velvet and silk. The king's questions continue, sharp and methodical, like a surgeon's probes. He asks about the moonlit meeting in the garden. Rowan, his voice now a weak mumble, describes the brief, shadowy encounter. The Queen lets out a short, sharp laugh of pure derision. The idea is so insulting, so preposterous, it is beyond anger. The king asks about the intermediary, and for the first time in this room of power, the name of the true architect of this chaos is spoken aloud. The Comtesse de la Motte Valois, Rowan whispers. He tries to explain, to make them understand how convincing she was, how the letters and the meetings all seemed so real. But it is too late for explanations. In the eyes of the king and queen, he is either a conspirator in a treasonous plot to defraud the crown, or he is a fool of such monumental proportions that he is unfit to hold any office of trust. One of the ongoing debates among historians is just what Louis XVI truly believed in that moment. Did he see Rowan as a knave or a fool? The evidence suggests he leaned towards knave, believing the cardinal had knowingly used a forged document, hoping to force the Queen to pay to avoid a scandal, thereby indebting her to him and restoring his political fortunes. The king has heard enough. He turns to his ministers. A brief, whispered consultation. The decision is made. Justice must be swift, public, and absolute. He turns back to the cardinal. "I find myself," the king says, his voice devoid of all emotion, "with no other choice but to order your arrest." Arrest. The word hangs in the air, unthinkable. An arrest of a prince of the church, a member of the Rohan family, here in the Palace of Versailles on one of the holiest days of the year. It is a political earthquake. But the king is not finished. The scene is about to become one of the most famous and dramatic moments in the history of the French court. Instead of having the cardinal quietly escorted to his rooms, the king orders his captain of the guard to perform the arrest immediately. And not here in the privacy of the study, but out there. The doors of the study are thrown open. The cardinal, pale and stumbling, is led out. He emerges from the quiet of the king's apartments back into the bustling, noisy heart of the palace. The vast, sun-drenched gallery is filled with hundreds of courtiers, all waiting for the high mass to begin. They are gossiping, laughing, adjusting their wigs. Cardinal de Rohan, The man who was supposed to be leading them all in prayer is being escorted under guard through the center of the hall. His face is as white as his lace cuffs. The captain of the guard walks beside him, his hand resting meaningfully on the hilt of his sword. A wave of shocked silence spreads through the crowd. The whispers and laughter die. All you can hear is the soft scuff of the cardinal's buckled shoes on the parquet floor. Every eye in the kingdom, it seems, is upon him. He is being marched past the very people whose favor he had spent his life cultivating. This public humiliation is a calculated act by the king. It is meant to be a clear, unambiguous signal. This is what happens to those who trifle with the honor of the queen. The scandal has now exploded. It is no longer a secret, but the most sensational public news in a generation. The story spreads through Paris like wildfire. A cardinal arrested in the Hall of Mirrors. A mysterious countess. A diamond necklace of unimaginable value. And at the center of it all, a silent, enigmatic queen. The king and queen thought a swift, public arrest would vindicate her honor and end the matter. They could not have been more wrong. They had not ended the story. They had just lit the fuse on a bomb that would blow the foundations of their world apart. Let the image of the stunned and silent Hall of Mirrors fade, replaced by the damp, grey stone of the Bastille. Cardinal de Rohan, stripped of his fine robes, is now a prisoner in the infamous fortress prison. His world shrunk to the size of a single, cold cell. Jeanne de Lamotte is also imprisoned, though she is given slightly more comfortable quarters, a testament, perhaps, to the lingering power of her acclaimed Valois blood. The other players, her husband, the forger Valette, who is soon extradited from Switzerland, the hired Queen Nicole d'Oliva, and even the mystic Cagliostro, are all rounded up. The cast is assembled. The stage is set for the next, the most disastrous, act of this drama. The king and queen have made a catastrophic miscalculation. By arresting the cardinal so publicly, they intended to demonstrate the queen's absence and the cardinal's guilt. But they had a choice. The king could have judged the case himself in a private royal tribunal. It would have been swift, decisive, and controlled. But Louis XVI, in a decision that historians still debate and lament, chose a different path. He wanted to be seen as a modern, enlightened monarch, a ruler of laws, not of whims. He decided to hand the case over to the Parliament of Paris, the highest court in the land. This was like throwing a lit match into a room full of gunpowder. The Parliament was not a simple court of law. It was a powerful, quasi-political body made up of aristocrats and wealthy lawyers, many of whom were deeply resentful of the monarchy's absolute power. They saw themselves as the guardians of French tradition against royal overreach. For years, they had been a thorn in the king's side, and he had just handed them the greatest scandal of the century, a case that involved a prince of the church and the queen of the realm. It was a gift. The trial becomes the obsession of the entire nation. It is the O.J. Simpson trial of the 18th century. Every detail, every rumor, every piece of testimony is eagerly consumed by the public. Lawyers for both sides lead documents and spin narratives to the press, and Paris at this time has a thriving, unregulated, and deeply scurrilous press. A flood of cheap pamphlets, known as libellous, pours from the city's printing shops. They are filled with gossip, satire, cartoons, and outright lies, all designed to feed the public's insatiable appetite for the scandal. You are there, in the crowded, stuffy courtroom. Or rather, you are outside, in the streets, reading the latest pamphlets, trying to piece the story together like everyone else. The case is incredibly complex. There are multiple defendants, all pointing fingers at each other. The forger, Valette, confesses to writing the letters. The Queen, Nicole, confesses to her role in the garden. But the central conflict is between the two main figures, the cardinal and the countess. Rohan's defense is simple. He was an innocent, lovesick fool, a man so blinded by his devotion to the queen that he was duped by a master manipulator. He portrays himself as a victim, a man whose only crime was loving his queen too much. His aristocratic family, the powerful House of Rohan, rallies to his cause, spending a fortune on the best lawyers and a massive public relations campaign to shape his image as a noble martyr. Jeanne d'Armont, on the other hand, puts on the performance of a lifetime. From her prison cell, she writes her memoirs, a wild, sensational, and almost entirely fictional account of the affair. She claims that she too was a pawn, but in a much more sinister game. She alleges that the Queen was not only aware of the necklace purchase, but was the secret mastermind behind it. She paints a picture of Marie Antoinette as a decadent, manipulative, and sexually voracious woman who used her gene to satisfy her own greedy desires and then framed everyone else when the plot was discovered. She claims to have been the Queen's secret lover, a scandalous and completely baseless accusation that was nonetheless eagerly believed by a public already primed to think the worst of their foreign-born Queen. And where is the Queen in all of this? She is trapped in Versailles, a helpless spectator at her old trial. Royal protocol dictated that she could not possibly appear in court to defend herself. To do so would be beneath the dignity of the crown. All she can do is remain silent, watching from afar as her name is dragged through the mud, her character assassinated daily in the Parisian press. Her innocence, which seemed so obvious and self-evident to her and the king, is now just one story among many, competing for the public's belief. Let's step out of the formal courtroom with its robed judges and its sworn testimonies, and into a much larger, more chaotic, and ultimately more powerful chamber. This trial isn't just happening in the Palais de Justice. It's happening in every café, every salon, and on every street corner in Paris. And in this court, the rules of evidence are very different. Here, gossip is fact, rumor is proof. And a well-crafted lie is more powerful than the most inconvenient truth. You are walking the streets of Paris, and the air is thick with the smell of wet cobblestones, roasting chestnuts, and fresh ink. The city is wallpapered with the infamous libelles, the scandalous pamphlets that are shaping the narrative of the affair. You stop at a bookseller's stall to look at them. The paper is cheap, the printing is crude, but the content is explosive. The cartoons are the most powerful. You see one depicting a regal-looking Cardinal de Rohan, kneeling in chains, offering his heart to a snaring, haughty Marie Antoinette, who tramples it under her foot. Another shows the Queen as a monstrous harpy, her claws clutching the diamond necklace while Jeanne d'Armont weeps in the background. A particularly vicious one portrays the Queen and Jeanne as secret lovers, exchanging the necklace as a token of their decadent affair, and incredibly effective. It bypasses reason and goes straight for the gut. These pamphlets are not just random expressions of public anger. They are a sophisticated, and often coordinated, propaganda campaign. The Rohan family, with its immense wealth and political connections, is funding a significant portion of this. They are determined to save their family's honor by destroying the Queen's. They portray the Cardinal not as an arrogant fool who got caught, but as a pious, kind-hearted man, a martyr to royal tyranny, a victim of a foreign, manipulative woman. And they find a very receptive audience. You have to understand the context. For years, a deep well of resentment against Marie Antoinette had been building. She was treacherous, the Austrian woman, a foreigner from France's traditional enemy. Her perceived extravagance, her private parties at the Petit Trianon, and her seeming disregard for the rigid etiquette of the French court were all seen as evidence of her moral corruption. The public was already deeply suspicious of her, and most persistent rumors that plagued her for years was that she was a spy for her brother, the Holy Roman Emperor. This accusation, for which there is absolutely no evidence, speaks to the deep-seated xenophobia she faced. The affair of the diamond necklace was not the cause of this hatred, but the catalyst that made it explode. It confirmed every dark suspicion the public already held. Of course she was greedy enough to want the necklace. Of course she was deceitful enough to arrange a secret purchase. Of course she was cruel enough to sacrifice her loyal servant, the Cardinal, when the plot was exposed. Jeanne's wild, self-serving lies from prison were believed because they fit a pre-existing narrative. The Queen's silence, dictated by royal protocol, was interpreted as the silence of guilt. And so, a bizarre and deeply unjust inversion takes place in the public mind. The primary victim of the crime, Marie Antoinette, is recast as its chief perpetrator. The gullible, arrogant fool, Cardinal de Rohan, is transformed into a romantic, tragic hero. and the brilliant, ruthless con artist, Jean de Lamotte, becomes a kind of folk hero, a plucky commoner who dared to speak truth to power, even if that truth was a complete fabrication. The judges of the Parliament of Paris do not live in a vacuum. They hear the gossip in the salons. They feel the immense pressure of public opinion. The king had wanted a trial of law, but he has unleashed a trial by popular sentiment. And that sentiment is running, like a tidal wave, directly against his wife. As the trial moves towards its conclusion, the legal facts of the case, the forged letters, the impersonator, the dismantled necklace seem to matter less and less. What matters is the story. And the story that Paris has decided to believe is one of a good French cardinal being crushed by a wicked Austrian queen. Let the roar of the Parisian street printers and the whispers of the salons coalesce into a single hell breath. The trial, which has consumed the nation for months, is finally drawing to a close. We find ourselves back in the grand, echoing chamber of the Parliament of Paris. The day of the verdict has arrived. May 31st, 1786, the room is packed to the rafters with aristocrats, lawyers and journalists, all straining to hear, to be a part of this historic moment. The accused are brought in one last time, the cardinal, pale but composed, looking every bit the noble martyr. Jean de Lamotte, defiant and theatrical to the very end. The other, lesser players, looking terrified and small in the grand machinery of justice. The judges, in their solemn black robes and powdered wigs, file in and take their seats. A heavy, profound silence falls over the courtroom. Then he comes to the main defendant. The name of the Comtesse de la Motteville is read out. She is found guilty on all counts, guilty of fraud, theft, and of falsely using the Queen's name. Her sentence is severe. She is to be publicly whipped, branded on both shoulders with the letter V for vole use, thief, and then imprisoned for life in the Salpêtrière, a grim, notorious prison for women. At the reading of her sentence, Jean erupts in a fury, screaming and fighting against the guards. It is a dramatic and dignified end to her grand performance. Now only one name remains. The silence in the courtroom becomes absolute. Everyone leans forward. The fate of the cardinal, a prince of the church, a Rohan, hangs in the balance. The magistrate clears his throat. Concerning Louis René Edouard, Cardinal de Rohan, he begins. He reads through the legal findings. And then the final, stunning words. The court finds him innocent of all charges and orders his immediate release. A wave of sound crashes through the courtroom. A mixture of gasps, stunned murmurs, and then a roar of approval. The verdict is not just an acquittal. It is a triumph. The judges, by a narrow majority, have chosen to believe Rowan's story. They have officially declared him a gullible but innocent victim. The news flies from the courtroom into the streets of Paris, and the city explodes in celebration. Crowds pour into the streets, cheering, singing, and lighting bonfires. They surround the Bastille, demanding the immediate release of their hero. When the cardinal is finally let out, his carriage is mobbed by a jubilant crowd. They unhitch the horses and pull the carriage through the streets themselves, a sign of immense popular honor. They see him not just as an innocent man, but as a David who has faced down the Goliath of the monarchy. And here lies the central, devastating irony of the entire affair, a point that historians never cease to emphasize. The verdict was a complete and utter disaster for the monarchy. The Parliament of Paris, in a stunning act of political defiance, had publicly and legally slapped the Queen in the face. By acquitting the cardinal, they had implicitly validated his story, and by extension had cast ashes on hers. If the cardinal was an innocent victim, then who was the guilty party? The court did not say. It did not have to. The pamphlets and the public had already decided. The acquittal was seen by the king and queen not as a legal judgment, but as a declaration of war. The king, furious at the court's defiance, used his royal authority to strip the cardinal of his court positions and exile him to a remote abbey. But this act only made Rowan seem more like a martyr in the public eye, a victim of the king's tyranny. They had sought justice, and in doing so had created a political catastrophe. The trial was over. The legal case was closed. Septic wound to the reputation of the queen and the authority of the crown was just beginning to fester. Let the bonfires in the streets of Paris die down to smouldering embers. Let the jubilant cheers for the acquitted cardinal fade into the quiet, echoing corridors of Versailles. For Marie Antoinette, the verdict is not an ending. It is a life sentence. She is a prisoner now, not in the stone walls of the Bastille, but in a far more inescapable fortress, the hatred and suspicion of her own people. You are with her in the days and weeks following the trial. The atmosphere at the palace is heavy, suffocating. The courtiers whisper behind their fans, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Every smile seems forced, every bow a little too shallow. The queen tries to maintain her composure, to go about the endless, rigid rituals of her day. The public waking up, the public dressing, the public dining. But the performance has become an unbearable strain. She feels the verdict as a physical blow, a brand of shame seared onto her name. Though the court had not, and could not, find her guilty of any crime, the public acquittal of Rowan was a de facto conviction in the court of public opinion. She is now, and will forever be, Madame Deficit, the woman who would bankrupt France for a diamond necklace. It does not matter that she refused the necklace. It does not matter that she refused the necking of an elaborate fraud, and it fits too perfectly with the public's darkest assumptions about her. The lie has become the truth. This is a turning point in her life, a moment from which she will never truly recover. The frivolous, carefree young princess from Austria is gone for good. In her place is a woman who is wary, isolated, and increasingly haunted. Her hair, it is said, began to show streaks of grey. She retreats ever more into the privacy of her small circle of friends and her children, finding solace at her beloved Petit Trianon, her fantasy village, where she could pretend, for a few hours, not to be the most hated woman in France. But even this retreat is turned against her. The pamphlets portray her little farm as a scene of decadent, mock peasant debauchery, another example of her detachment from the suffering of her people. And here is a small but poignant historical detail. Before the affair, Marie Antoinette had been a leader of fashion, but a relatively modest one by the standards of the time. In the years after the trial, something changes, whether out of despair, defiance, or simply a sense of what does it matter now. Her spending on clothing and jewelry, while never approaching the fictional cost of the necklace, does increase significantly. Having been convicted in public for a crime of extravagance she did not commit, she decided she might as well play the part she had been assigned. Historians continue to debate this shift. Was it a political miscalculation, or the tragic, self-destructive act of a woman who felt she had nothing left to lose? Meanwhile, the saga of Jean de la Motte takes one last, dramatic twist. She does not languish in prison for life. A year or so after her conviction, she escapes. The details of the escape are murky. Some say it was arranged by her husband, others that she simply disguised as a boy and walked out. A more conspiratorial theory, popular at the time, was that the Queen's allies secretly arranged the escape, fearing that Jean might reveal even more damaging and equally false secrets from her prison cell. Jean flees to London, the haven for French dissidents. And from there, she unleashes her final, most poisonous act of revenge. She publishes the full, unexpurgated version of her memoirs, a masterpiece of slanderous fiction. It is filled with lurid, explicit, and utterly baseless stories of the Queen's corruption, greed, and supposed sexual escapades. This book is banned in France, which, of course, only makes it the most sought-after and widely smuggled book in the kingdom. It is read and believed by thousands. It becomes the definitive, accepted account of the affair for a huge portion of the French population. The Queen is now wrapped. The legal verdict was a disaster. The popular verdict is a catastrophe. And the historical verdict is being written in real time by the very criminal who orchestrated her ruin. The diamond necklace is gone, broken into 1,000 pieces, but it has been replaced by something far more dangerous. A story. A simple, powerful, and poisonous story of a wicked queen and a nation she has wronged. And that story is now set in stone. And so, The story settles, like a fine, toxic dust, over the kingdom of France. The main players are scattered, the cardinal in his comfortable exile, Jean in her London garret, the queen in her gilded prison of public opinion. The trial is over, but the affair is not. The poison has only just begun to seep into the soil. The real damage wasn't financial. The French treasury was already in a catastrophic state due to wars and systemic tax problems. The price of one necklace, however exorbitant, was a drop in an ocean of debt. The true cost was paid in something far more precious: belief. The magic spell of the monarchy, its aura of divine right and inherent superiority, was broken. The affair had shown the world that a queen could be depicted as a common thief, a cardinal as a bumbling fool, and that the highest court in the land could openly defy the king's will. The monarchy was no longer sacred. It was just another group of deeply flawed, and possibly corrupt, people. And what of the necklace itself, the physical object that started it all? Its fate is a footnote, but a telling one. Most of the larger stones were successfully sold off by Nicolas Deal on Martin London's diamond market. Unlike famous, named gems like the Hope Diamond, which had a known history, these were simply high-quality loose stones. They were recouped, resold, and absorbed anonymously into the vast, glittering ocean of the European jewelry trade. Some of them might still be out there today, sitting in a ring or a tiara in some vault, their owners blissfully unaware of the role they played in toppling a throne. A few of the smaller stones were recovered from dealers in Paris, but the great river of diamonds had vanished, trickling away into 1,000 anonymous pockets. Just 3 years after the verdict, the French Revolution would begin, and as the revolutionaries sought to justify their cause, the memory of the affair of the diamond necklace was a weapon, ready-made and perfectly sharpened. When the cries for bread turned into cries for liberty, the image of Madame Deficit, the Austrian queen who would supposedly buy a multi-million-livre necklace while her people starved, was plastered on every wall. An easily understood symbol of aristocratic rot, before the word meme even existed. The story became a foundational myth of the revolution, a simple, powerful narrative of royal corruption that helped fuel the rage that would eventually lead the king and queen to the guillotine. And here in the quietest archives, where the dust of centuries has settled on the court documents, historians still have their most profound argument. Was the affair of the diamond necklace a primary cause of the French Revolution? Or was the revolution an unstoppable force, born of deep economic and social pressures, with the affair serving merely as a convenient, unspectacular accelerant? Most today would argue for the latter. The fire was already laid. Jean de la Motte did not build it. With her brilliant, sociopolitic ambition, provided one of the most powerful and memorable sparks that would set it all ablaze. It all began so quietly, with 2 jewelers under jewel to grand to sell, with a proud cardinal nursing a wounded ego, with a clever, resentful woman living in a borrowed apartment. It was a story of small, deeply human failings, vanity, greed, and a desperate desire to be loved and accepted. But in the fragile, glittering, and fatally unbalanced world of 18th century France, those small failings were magnified, amplified, and twisted until they brought an entire world crashing down. The necklace was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a tiny, sharp key that helped unlock the bloodiest and most transformative revolution the world had ever seen. And so we leave them there, frozen in the amber of history. The queen, the cardinal, the countess, all swept away by the great storm they helped to unleash. The sounds of Versailles have faded now, and the angry shouts from the streets of Paris have softened into a distant, gentle hum, a hum that can now easily dissolve into the quiet of your own room. The glitter of diamonds has melted away into the soft darkness behind your eyelids. And perhaps now, you can feel the story itself begin to change. Its sharp edges are softening, its characters becoming less like figures from history and more like the half-remembered faces of a dream you are just beginning to enter. There is nothing left to follow, no plot to unravel. The intricate web of lies has been untangled and now lies still. You can let it all go. You can feel yourself drifting now, floating on a quiet current, away from the world of gilded cages and forged letters, and into a much simpler, much calmer space. A space of deep and profound rest. The story has done its work. It has walked with you for a time, a gentle companion on your path towards slumber. But here, the path grows soft, and my voice will begin to fade, leaving you to continue the journey on your own, into the peaceful and welcoming landscape of your own dream. The final page is turned. If your eyelids are still not heavy, another story might be the final lullaby you need. Sleep sweetly.